Hello and welcome to Chapter 5, Section 5, Compare and Order Rational Numbers. This is going to start on textbook page 387 and go through textbook page 390. You're going to go ahead and take a look here. I know this is the same old screen you're used to seeing, but I have added the headphones icon up there in the top right corner, or the headphones picture rather. And that's just so that you remember that you need to be in a nice quiet location. You need to, headphones preferably, or unless of course your parents are listening with you, that would be fine. And then you need to have your math book out because that's where all your work is going to go. You need to do all the on your own problems with pencil. I know a couple of you are still trying to do that in colored pencil. Please, this is for the on your own problems. Then colored pencil is going to be for your notes and your outside, just examples, making sure that you can bring attention to certain problems and make sure that you're thinking and listening about the words that you're hearing and the work that you're doing. Go ahead and start on textbook page 387 where you see this cool looking green June beetle. And it says, scan the lesson, list 2 headings you would use to make an outline of the lesson. So this is a little bit, this is worded a little bit differently than when we're used to seeing, but one of the headings could be compare decimals and fractions. And another heading that we could use is compare and order rational numbers. So you want to make sure that you get those 2 headings listed there. Under the real world link, you'll see the lengths of several common types of insects are shown in the table. Which of the insects is the longest? So you want to look at the different lengths and you're going to have to compare these, but because they're fractions, you can't really compare them just yet. So you want to just take a look at them, and a lot of them you kind of already know what the answer is for what needs to go beside them, but 3/4 is going to be the equivalent of 0.75, and we know that because 3 divided by 4 gives us 0.75. So right off to the right here, I'm just going to put 0.75. Then with 1/1, we know that that's 1. So if we were talking percentages, we'd be talking 75% and we'd be talking 100%. So 1 is obviously greater than 0.75. The fire ant is 1/3. So that 1/3, remember, this should be one that you just have memorized. That 1/3 is going to be the equivalent of 0.33333 going on and on. So you can put a bar over that. And then 3/4 again is 0.75, so we're just going to put that off to the right. 1/4 is 0.25. Hopefully you know that off the top of your head. If you don't, you can do the division. 1/2 is 0.5 or 0.50. Either would be fine. And then you have 5/8. This one may not be commonly known to you, so you're going to do 5 divided by 8. 0, decimal, decimal, 0, and then 8 goes into 50, 6 times, and you get 48 here, 2 left over, bring down the 0, so we get 2 here, so 8 times 2 is 16, and we are left with 4, then carry the 0 down here, and 5 times 8 is 40. So now we have our last decimal, which will be 0.625. So now we can look at these and we can compare them, and we can see that the cricket is going to be the largest. Now, we could have done that without getting all of the decimal information, but it's just a good habit for you to just make sure that you have all the information there. So you're going to write cricket under which of the insects is the longest. Then it says to shade each fraction strip to represent the length of a fire ant and a housefly. Which is longer, the fire ant or the housefly? So we're going to go ahead and look at the fire ant. I'm going to change colors here, and the fire ant, remember, is 1/3. So we're going to go ahead and shade in this 1/3 here, and then go ahead and get it all the way over there, you too. And then the housefly, I'm going to change colors, and we're going to make that orange. The housefly is going to be 1/4, so we're going to shade in that whole 1/4 box right here. Shade, 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 shade. All right, and then it says which one is longer. So as you can see, the fire ant that we boxed in green and then we shaded in green is going to be longer. So we're going to write fire ant right here. And now it says, how many of the insects are longer than 0.5 inch, or inches rather, than 0.5 inch? I guess it would just be 1/2 of an inch. So you want to look and see, remember it's longer, so we're looking to see how many are longer than 0.5. So I'm going to change colors now to pink again, and I'm just going to put a check mark on the left-hand side if it's longer than 0.5. So as you can see, the green June beetle is, the cricket obviously is, the fire ant is not, because 0.5 is not, 0.33 is not larger than 0.5. The firefly is, the housefly is not. Now it says longer than 0.5. So notice the Japanese beetle, that can't be because it is 0.5. So don't get tricked there. And the mosquito is. So now for your answers, you're going to list green June beetle, cricket, firefly, and mosquito. and that would actually be 4 because it says how many of them. So you're going to write 4 insects right there. And for the last piece, it says order the length of the housefly, a green June beetle, and a fire ant from shortest to longest. Okay, so now here's what we're going to do. We need to look at the decimals to figure out which one's shortest and which one's longest, but then when we put them in order, we're going to actually use the fraction that they gave us. So let's first find the 3 of them. So we've got housefly, which is right here. We've got green June beetle, which is right here. And we've got fire ant, which is right here. So I've made a line next to them. So now I'm going to compare them. We've got 0.75. Whoops. There we go. We've got 0.75. We have 0.33 that goes on, and we have 0.25. So out of those, the housefly is going to be the smallest because it's 0.25, and it's, I'm sorry, the shortest rather, and it said shortest to longest. So that means the 0.25, remember the fraction was 1/4, so we're just going to put a 1/4 right here, okay? Now we're going to go ahead and take a look, and we're going to see next that the fire ant should be next, and that's 0.33, which converts back into 1/3, okay? And then the last one, of course, then would be the green June beetle, and that would be at 0.75, and the fraction for 0.75 is going to be 3/4. And all of those should, of course, be in inches, so they've actually added the little inches there, so you should too. All right, you're all set there. Let's go ahead and see what we have next. On textbook page 388, you should see compared decimals and fractions. Then it says positive and negative rational numbers can be represented on a number line. Okay, so on a number line. And then it says you can use a number line to help you compare and order rational numbers. All right, so number line's one way to do it. It says examples. Fill in each circle with a less than, greater than, or equal to make the statement true. Well, first of all, we can use a number line, but obviously since one of our numbers is negative and one is positive, we should know immediately that this one's going to be greater because just by virtue of it being positive, it's going to be greater. So make a little note to yourself out to the side about that. Okay, so out to the side, you can see that I've made myself a little note, and I would like you to write that as well. It says one is positive, one is negative. So the positive is automatically greater. So you just want to remember that. And then you're going to go ahead and graph those 2 points. So there they go. And it says since negative 1/2 is to the left of negative 0.8, negative 1/2 is less than 0.8. So now we're going to go ahead and look here. Now we check and we see both numbers are negative. So this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. Now we definitely need to use the number line. So we're going to plot the points here. The ones they gave us are negative 1.40. So we're going to go ahead and put that dot right there. And negative 1.25. Now you have to think about this because you have negative 1.20 and negative 1.30, so that's why this is going to go halfway in between those. So now you have to think also about where that 0 would be. Remember, your 0 is going to be up here at the top, okay? So when it says to graph the numbers on the number line, which one is greater? The one that's closest to the 0 at the top is going to be greater. So now because it's closer to 0, the 1.25 is going to be greater. Oops, let's go ahead and do that in orange. Greater. There we go. So now it's negative 1.40 is less than negative 1.25. So again, the first thing I checked for was to see if they were both negative or positive or one was each. So they are both negative, so then we actually have to really pay attention. Right, so now as you can see, we have negative 3/8 and negative 5/16. So what I want you to do is, even though this is already done for you, I need you to go ahead and follow along with what I'm doing. So we've got negative 3/8, and we're comparing that to negative 5/16. So the first thing I need to do is get a common denominator. So I'm going to do that with yellow right here, and I'm going to put a 16 right here. So how do I get from 8 to 16? Well, I multiply by 2. And then that means I have to do the same on the top, multiply by 2. So 3 times 2 is 6. So now, and don't forget your negative sign. So now my new comparison is going to be negative 6/16 and negative 5/16. Now this is going to be tricky because remember, you're in the negative zone now. So what would normally be greater is not going to be greater. So now we want to go ahead and plot those. We've got negative 5/16 right here. So I'm going to put a big circle there. And then we've got negative 6/16 here. And then you always want to double check where the 0 is. So I'm going to circle my 0, and whichever one is closest to 0, and when I say closest to 0, it's further to the right, I should say. Sorry about that. Whichever one is further to the right or further up, if you're going up and down, is going to be the one that's greater. So the negative 5/16 is greater, so you're going to put a big greater sign there, and you'll also put one right there. Okay? So remember, they did show you again how to do the least common multiple here. And just remember, when you're looking for that common denominator, you want to first check to see, can the little one go into the big one? That's the 8 going into the 16. And in this case, you could. So that's why we went ahead and did that in that step. Okay, you want to pause the video now, and you want to go ahead and try one. You also want to draw yourself a little number line as well. And actually, I take that back. I wasn't actually even thinking about the problem. For this one, it's super duper easy because one is positive and one is negative. So hopefully you realized that right away and you went, okay, 3.1 is definitely greater than negative 3.7. And that's really pretty much all there is to do for that specific problem. Now we have negative 4.5 and negative 4.49. So now is when it would be best for you to add that number line. All right, so as you can see, I've drawn a makeshift number line here. So let's go ahead and first plot our point negative 4.5, which is going to be right here. So we'll plot that one there. And then we have negative 4.49. Now just, you want to keep in mind that this is negative 4.4 right here. So negative 4.41, 4.42, and so on. So negative 4.49 would fall just before negative 4.5. So now you also want to identify where that 0 would be. So keep in mind that the further right you go, the closer you're going to get to 0. So now when you're deciding which one is going to be greater, you can see that the green one of negative 4.49 is going to be greater. So that's going to be greater than, just like that. Now, when I say greater than, I meant negative 4.49 is greater than. So the way the sentence actually reads is negative 4.5 is less than negative 4.49. So hopefully that wasn't confusing where I was saying greater than. I was saying that negative 4.49 is greater than. So now we're going to go ahead and go to the next one. We have 9/16 and 12/16. Now both of these are positive and both have the same denominator. So really there was only a little bit of comparison to do. You only had to compare the numerators. So when you're comparing the numerators, 12/16 is going to be greater than 9/16. And that's really all the work that there is to be done for this. And it's mainly, like I said, because the denominators are the same and because they are both positive. So you do want to make that note out to the side. Okay, so I've made that note out to the side. Both are positive, that positive sign. The denominators are the same, so compare the numerators. That's all you need to do for that problem. Now we've got negative 7/10 and negative 4/5. Both are negative, so that doesn't help us out, and they have a different denominator. So we need to go ahead and change that denominator. So now we're going to be comparing negative 7/10 to negative 4/5. But that negative 4/5 needs to become something else. So we're going to first ask ourselves, does the small denominator fit into the large one? And it does. So now 5 times 2 is 10, so we do the same on the top. 4 times 2 is 8. So now I'm going to rewrite my problem. You should as well. Negative 7/10, and now we're going to be comparing it to negative 8/10. Don't forget that you still have that negative sign. So now I'm not going to really, I'll go ahead and add a number line here, but the fraction part of it is not quite as important as the numerator is. It's really important here that you make the number line so that you can get your mind around exactly what this means. Okay, so as you can see, I've made a number line here, and I would like you to do the same thing. And now I'm going to take my lime green, and I'm going to plot a dot right here on, or graph a dot right here on the negative 7/10. And then I'm going to take that turquoise color and graph a dot right here on the negative 8/10. So now I'm also then going to make sure that I recognize where the 0 is, and I can see that the negative 7/10 is going to be closer to 0 than negative 8/10, or it's going to be farther to the right, I should say. So that means that in our original problem, negative 7/10 is going to be greater than negative 4/5. So we're just going to write a greater than sign right there. All right, so now you want to take a look at textbook page 389, which says to compare and order rational numbers. So it says to compare and order rational numbers, first write them in the same form. So that's going to be important that you're able to write them in the same form. So now it says example 4. And when it says stop and reflect, it says, how could you represent that 8.3 feet is deeper than, negative 8.3 feet is deeper than negative 5.7 feet? Explain. So we're just going to kind of sit on that for a second, and we're going to go ahead and work on our problem. So now it says fill in the circle with less than, greater than, or equal to make the statement true. So remember, the first check that we're going to do is we're going to check to see if the signs are the same. The signs are the same, so they're both negative. So now what we need to do is get them into the same format. So I have negative 0.51 and I have negative 8/15. So I would need to rename negative 8/15 as a decimal so that I can compare them and put them on a graph. So let's do that now. So when I do that, when I turn 8/15 into a decimal, I'm going to take 8 and I'm literally going to divide it by 15. When I do that, obviously, and because it's a fraction, we know that it's not going to be a number greater than 1. So we're immediately going to do 0, decimal, decimal, 0. You may remember that from when we were doing decimals and fractions. So now 15, 30, 45, 60, 75. So if we get 5, we know that 5 times 15 is 75. We have 5 left over. Carry down another 0. 15, 30, 45, so that'll be 3 is 45. Whoops, my 5 looks a little crazy there. All right, there we go. And then as you can see, this pattern is going to repeat itself. We're now at 50, 50, 50. So see the 50 here and the 50 here? I'm going to go ahead and erase those because I don't want it to look like minus 50. But that's how we know that pattern's now going to repeat. And remember, in our last section, we just learned that that bar goes over that. You want to make sure that the bar in this problem is only going to go over the 3, not the 5, 3. Because if it goes over the 5, 3, then that means it's going to repeat the whole pattern 5, 3, 5, 3, 5, 3, 5, 3, which is not correct. It's actually just going to be 0.533333. So notice there is a difference there. So now we're going to be comparing, and you want to add this up here at the top, negative 0.51 to negative 0.53 with a bar over it. Now remember what I said before when I said longer doesn't mean larger, it just means more precise or more accurate. So when you're comparing, and you can see here that they've done this, you need to make sure that you're comparing digit by digit. So negative and negative, 0, 0, those are all the same. 5 and 5, those are the same. So then we have negative 1 and negative 3. So you want to think about that. Negative 3 would be farther to the left. So that's why negative 0.53 is plotted farther to the left. So you can see where it's plotted right here, and then we'll go ahead and plot negative 0.51 here. So now you can see that negative 0.51 is going to be greater than negative 8/15. So that's how we're going to work through those types of problems. And I should definitely see your work off to the side here for the types of problems where you need to change it into a decimal. All right, so on example 5 here, it says to order the set, negative 2.46, negative 2/25, and negative 2 1/10 from least to greatest. So the first thing I'm going to notice and point out is that it's going to be from least to greatest. That's super important, so you always want to make sure to point that out. And then I'm going to go ahead and make sure that all of these are negative or that all of them are positive. Because remember, you want to double check that first because any of the positives would be greater than any of the negatives, regardless of what the number was. So now you have write negative 2 and 22/25 and negative 2 1/10 as decimals to the hundredths place. So you can see that they've done that work there for you. They've done, and the way that they did this one, and I'm just going to go ahead and do it for you as well so that you can get a refresher in this. The way that they did negative 2 and 22/25 is first when you're converting negative 2 and 22/25 to a decimal, it's going to start out, or you're going to start out rather, by saying that we know it's going to be negative 2 point something, right? And then remember, the 22/25 are pretty easy to take care of because if you have 22/25, you can set that up next to 100 and multiply by 4 and multiply by 4, and that gives you 88. So that's where that 88 came from for the 2.88. And it's negative 2.88. So you want to make sure that you show me this work whenever you're converting that. And again, negative 2 1/10 works the same way. It's pretty easy. You start with negative 2 1/10. And you know that that's immediately going to convert to negative 2 point something. And then if you don't remember how to do that, you can look at 1/10 and set it up next to 100 and say, okay, to get from 10 to 100, I multiply by 10. So now I'm going to multiply by 10 and I get 10 hundredths. So that's where I'm going to get that 1 0 or 1. So now we have 2.1, negative 2.1. So put a circle around that and a circle around that so you can see where those came from. Now we also have the negative 2.1 here. So now we're going to plot this, oops, and I'm going to go ahead and erase this part. I accidentally circled the wrong piece. There we go. Negative 2.88, negative 2.1, and then lastly we have negative 2.46. So then you can see that they have plotted them here on this line, 2.46, negative 2.46 rather. Then I'm going to switch to orange, negative 2.1, and then I'm going to switch to pink, negative 2.88. So the one that is furthest to the right is going to be the orange one, which is negative 2.1. So now it says least to greatest. So I know that that negative 2.1 is going to have to go on the far right because it's greatest. Now the least one is going to be the pink one. So it's negative 2.88. And then the one in the middle will be negative 2.46. Now we're not done with this problem because remember when we have these, we need to actually put them in their original format. This is the part that you are forgetting sometimes. So notice that we took the negative 2.88, see that right here, okay? That actually, we need to be able to refer that back, way back here, to the negative 2 and 22/25 because this is what needs to be in your final answer. So you can't forget that your answer must be in original format. So go ahead and write that. So right here, you can see that I've written a note for you. Answer must be in original form. So that is completely correct. And now notice I'm going to circle in orange that negative 2.1 because remember that went with negative 2 and 1/10. So notice here, the 2.1 went with negative 2 and 1/10. So you just want to make sure that for your final answer that you get it back in the original form. All right, you want to go ahead and try fill in each one of these. So you want to first remember, pause the video now and then we'll see how you did. All right, great, welcome back. So first, hopefully the first thing that you did was check to see if they were both negative or both positive, and they are both negative. So now we need to look at the numbers. So we can see that that negative 3 and 5/8, we're gonna wanna change that. So we have negative 3 and 5/8. We're going to want to change this to decimal form. So we know when we change it to decimal form, the first thing that we're going to do immediately is write negative 3 point, because we don't want to forget that there is a whole number portion there. So now we want to look at the 5/8. So let's take 5/8 and divide it out. 5 divided by 8. 0, decimal, decimal, 0. We know that that's there. 8 times 6 is 48. We have 2 left over, 0. 8 times 2 is 16. We have 4 left over, and carry down the 0. 8 times 5 is 40. And 40 is 0. Perfect. So now we know that it's our answer up here, or our conversion into decimal form, is actually going to be negative 3 point, and then we take the 625. And remember, we got that from right there, okay? So now, I'm going to just put a box around that so that we can keep our attention there. Now we know that negative 3.625 is what actually goes right here. And as you can see, negative 3.625 is the same as negative 3.625. So we're going to write a big equal sign right there, okay? Hopefully you got that one right. If you did not, you want to correct your work. All right, so now we're going to go ahead, whoops, sorry about that. We're going to go ahead and we're going to look at the first problem here that we have F. So for F, we're going to now divide out 3/7 so that we can figure out what that is as a decimal. So we're going to set that up as 3 divided by 7. And now you can see that I went ahead and I divided. Now I'm going to stop right here at 0.428 because now we have enough information that we can compare to the number that we have there. So if you notice, we have 0.413 that we're comparing it to. So we can stop at 0.428. That's plenty of information. So you want to add a little note off to the side that says when you have enough information to compare. So you want to stop then. So now we're going to look and we're going to go, okay, which one is larger? Now the good thing is that these are both positive numbers, so they're our normal right way of thinking in our brain. So 0, 0, that's the same, 4, 4, that's the same, and now you have 2. So the 2 is going to be larger than the 1 that's over here in the 0.413. So that's how you know that 3/7 is going to be larger. Now I can show you that off to the side as well. If you're comparing 0.428 and 0.413, notice that same, right? And then you get right here, 2 and 1. So now you know that that one is larger. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about there. So now we're going to go ahead and look at G. It says order the set from greatest to least. So remember, as I've told you before, that first step is going to be to put a box or something around the numbers there because we're going to be doing this from greatest to least. So now we're going to, first step, we're going to check to see are they all negative or are they all positive. Yes, they are. Okay, perfect. So now I've got negative 7.78, which I can leave alone, and I've got negative 7 and 17 hundredths. So let me go ahead and change that. So the first thing that we're going to do, and the reason I'm going straight to that one is because I've got negative 7 point, and 17 hundredths is just going to be 1/7. So that number is going to go with that one now. We have negative 7.78, which was already negative 7.78, so that one goes there. And now we just have to worry about the negative 7 and 13 twentieths. Now I know this is bringing back some old concepts for you, so it's good that you're reviewing these now. So we have negative 7 and 13 twentieths. So right away we know that's going to be equal to negative 7 point. Don't forget to do that. Don't wait to the end to do that, because once you start working on that 13 twentieths, it's very easy to forget. So now we're going to look at the 13 twentieths. 20 is compatible with 100, which makes our life a whole lot easier. We just put that up next to 100. Then 20 times 5 gives us 100. So now to find out what our numerator is, we're just going to multiply 13 times 5, and we get 65. So now that we have hundredths, remember this is sort of like the reverse lollipop where you put the decimal right there. Now you know it's going to be negative 7.65. So now I'm going to make this area right here my official ordering and comparing section. Now what you want to look at is you have the numbers negative 7.65, and that negative 7.65 goes with that, negative 7.78, and negative 7.17. So remember, when you're thinking about negative numbers and you're trying to compare, the larger the digit, the smaller the actual number. So with money, you can even look at these as in terms of money. If I owe you $7.78, that's the smallest number right there. So if you're looking, we need greatest to least, so we need the number that's closest to 0 in this situation. So negative 7.17 is actually going to be the greatest, but remember we have to have that in original format. So it's negative 7 and 17 hundredths. So that is our greatest right here, okay? And then, greatest, there we go. Hold on one second. Then we have negative 7 and 13 twentieths, because if you noticed, the 7.65 is going to be the next in line. So now that's going to be our next in line, and that's our original format. And then the last one is going to be negative 7.78. That's going to be our least. So you want to make sure you have all three of those in that order. Now you want to look at textbook page 390 with the flower pot example. It says, Mr. Plum's science class is growing plants under different conditions. The table shows the difference from the average for some students' plants. Order the differences from least to greatest. So I'm not going to have you go through all of that work again, but I want you to notice that you do need to know how to put these into the same format. So notice they have taken the 3 1/4 and made it into 3.25. Notice they have negative 2.2 right here. They've left that alone. Then you have 1/7. That 1/7 is right here, so notice that comes from there. And then you have negative 1/7, which comes from right here. So when you're putting all those in order, your final answer is going to be right here. You just want to make sure that you get that exactly as they have it there. And I'm just going to go ahead and do a little bit of it off to the side, and I would like you to as well. So the 3 1/4 is a positive number, but it's going to give us 3.25. Remember, anytime you have 1/4, it's going to be 2.25. Then you have negative 2.2. That one can be by itself, so that's fine. It's already in decimal format. And then you have 1.7. That one's all right. It's already in decimal format. And then the last one you really needed to convert was negative 1 7/10, which would literally convert to negative 1 point, and then it would just be 1.7, because remember that reverse lollipop, we're going to go ahead and take this and make it into a lollipop. So we have 0.7. So now that's how we have the negative 1.7. First thing that you want to get out, you want to make sure, because it's saying from least to greatest, so our least number is going to be our largest digit in the negative section. So that's how we get the negative 2.2. So negative 2.2 is the least. And then we're going to go to the next least, which would still be negative 1.7, which is actually negative 1 7/10. Okay. Then the next one is going to be 1.7, which is actually 1.7 because it was given to you as 1.7. And then the last one is just going to be good old 3 1/4. Okay. So you do want to show your work for that out to the side. So now you can see that I've asked you to do numbers 1 through 7, and I've said that you need to show me all of your work for problem numbers 4, 5, and 6. Now 1, 2, and 3, you can pretty much compare them just as they are. Even 3, though, you should convert this number right here. The 6 and 7/10 needs to be converted, but the rest of them you should be able to compare as is. And finally, you see, it says, when my math teacher says something, I'm like, what? You know I'm right. Enjoy, and I'll see you next class period.